Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we get an origin story for the Millennium Falcon. Only not so much in this episode. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. We continue to look at the Marvel UK stuff, original stories produced in the UK that were not reproduced in the United States until 1996's classic Star Wars Devil World, stuff that was never printed in the 80s in the United States. The story we're looking at this time is The Flight of the Falcon, by Steve Parkhouse, which you can find in the pages of Classic Star Wars Devil Worlds number 1, also in the pages of the Wild Space Volume 1 Omnibus. This is a weird story, but it's sort of an origin story designed to tell us how exactly the Millennium Falcon got into Han's hands. We get an introduction where the Empire is going after smugglers and whatnot here. It's during the early days, it says, of the Empire. These were the early years of the Empire's Outlands region, when its ragged borders were constantly harassed by raiders and smugglers, the dross of the uncivilized planets. And of course, this is UK, so uncivilized with an S-E-D on the end. And it turns out that the type of ship that's getting away from the Empire all the time is this one here. This is a Millennium Hawk. Not a Millennium Falcon, Millennium Hawk. A model of starship made by the Millennium Company. The Empire wants to stop the smugglers. So they go to the Millennium Astro Engineering plant and meet with Zoltan Star Kid, this bald guy here, who presents them with plans for a new prototype, or plans and a prototype, of a new ship that's supposed to be even better than the Millennium Hawks, the Millennium Falcon. So yes, according to the story, Millennium Falcon is a type of ship, not the name of Han Solo's ship. Or Han named it after the name of the ship. Which would basically mean that if it's part of a production line, it'd be like calling a Ford Mustang, Mustang. On the other hand, if only this prototype ever sees production, which is what this story kind of hints, calling it the Millennium Falcon makes sense, because it's the only one of that production line. So, one of the secretaries hears what's going on. She's sympathetic to the rebels. She takes that information, dresses up all kind of skankily, and goes to meet with Han Solo in a cantina, telling him exactly when it is the Imperials are supposed to take possession of the ship. The prototype is supposed to have a pilot being sent from Coruscant, well, the center of the Empire, but we know that's Coruscant. Han and his allies ambush the Imperials and the pilot and take their place. Therefore, Han, in the mask here, can come in as the supposed test pilot, take the Millennium Falcon, and just run the heck away with the ship. Once they're in space, we find that it is Han, and among the members of his team, Lando is also there, kind of there in the middle, hard to see because of the coloration job done on these original Dark Horse colored reprints. Hopefully it'll be better in the pages of Wild Space, which isn't out yet as of the time I'm recording this. And it turns out that Han has also gotten a bunch of money from the rebels because upon hearing about this in the Millennium plant, they kept the ship, the Millennium Falcon, but they let the rebels know about what was going on, and the rebels decide to go fly in with their X-Wings and destroy the plant. Of course, this all assumes a few things. It assumes that this actually can be the origin story of how Han got the Millennium Falcon, which it isn't. It assumes that he got it right there at the beginning of what we might think of as the Imperial era, which he doesn't, though the ship is around in that era as we learn later. And it kind of assumes that the rebellion is in full swing at that point. Of course, calling it the beginning of the Empire's outland regions may just mean that it's much later than the Empire itself. They just didn't get to that point immediately. That would make sense as well. The problem with the story, of course, is that it's non-canonical. It is in canon, tossed out the window. Okay. It was presented originally in The Empire Strikes Back Monthly number 157 in the UK in June of 1982. But decades later, we finally got more information on how Han got the Millennium Falcon in the pages of the Han Solo trilogy by Ann Crispin. Then a ton of great background detail about what's going on with the ship, who were its owners, how did it change hands over and over again in the relatively disappointing James Luceno novel Millennium Falcon. The one that's designed around the Maltese Falcon and has that ending that only makes sense if you've seen that. Otherwise, it's a down ending, blah, blah, blah. One of the more disappointing Star Wars books of its era. But Millennium Falcon tells us the real origin story, in a sense, for the ship. So this one, found in Devil Worlds #1, is gone. If you were a Marvel reader at the time, though, you might have thought this is the way it was meant to have happened, and believed it all the way up until when the modern continuity started to sort of change the way that worked out. You got to figure that at some point, if this is how Han got it, they assumed that it got into Lando's hands as part of the team, and then Lando lost it to Han, or maybe those two worked together and they had a bet going to decide who would get to keep the ship, and Han won it. Either way, it still, at this point, doesn't end at a point that we can think of as totally jiving with what we see in The Empire Strikes Back, but close enough that readers at the time could have believed this tale. So, this apocryphal story, The Flight of the Falcon, which is not to be confused with the Game Boy Advanced game of the same name by the now-defunct THQ company, is this an essential read? If it was the real origin, it would be, I would say. Unfortunately, it's not. It's just another of these what-if type of tales, apocryphal, in-canon, infinities, whatever you want to call it, and doesn't have an impact on anything because it's not even within the same continuity in a sense, unless you want to just think of this as sort of a rumor that some people say about how Han got the Falcon. So with that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.